let nothing hold me down. Gotta do it, because I may not get another chance. I believe it. If I want it, I can have it. I believe it. Done with falling, done with losing, I can do it. I think I'll tell myself again, I can do it, yeah. And I'm not gonna stop till I win, 'cause it's my time to rise. Hey, it's my time to shine. Oh, it's my time to live. It's my time to live. It's my time to fly. Oh, it's my time. It's my time. She's a deep.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Hey, to all my YouTubers out there. I am your girl, Dr. Najuma, and thank you for being tuned in to Living on Assignment Radio Live. Yes, we are live on YouTube tonight, because tonight I'm dialoguing with all of you. Typically, our normal format is I interview a special guest. So if you've never watched our show before, if you've never been a part of Living on Assignment Radio, scroll back to some of our past shows and you can see some wonderful interviews. And there's a bunch I still need to upload. But tonight, I want to talk to you all tonight, just me and you, and have an intimate conversation. I had an amazing time this weekend, and I want to tell you all about it. But before we get into that, let me introduce myself for those that may not know me or may not be familiar with our platform. You are being tuned in live to Living on Assignment Radio. We air every Sunday night from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. I love to talk to people about their stories, about how they are living out their assignment, how God has called them to live on assignment. And so we're always looking for wonderful guests. So if God is doing something amazing in your life, send us an email at livingonassignment, spelled all out, livingonassignment@gmail.com, and say, hey, Reverend Juma, I'd love to be a guest on your show. Here are the things that we're doing. Now, a lot of our show focuses on individuals in and around Southern California, but hey, if you're out of state, out of country even, send us an email anyway, because we can call you in and you can join us live here on YouTube. But yeah, we love to talk about how individuals are living on assignment and to capture those stories. I believe in the power of storytelling. I believe that stories is one of the best ways to communicate ideas, concepts, principles, values. I believe that when we communicate our stories, we can help each other grow and help each other build better. So that's what the radio show is all about. That's what we do every Sunday night at 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So join us. And again, if you know someone or if you believe that you'd be a wonderful guest on our show, come. Send me an email, livingonassignment@gmail.com. All spelled out, livingonassignment@gmail.com. And so, again, typically our format is I interview a wonderful guest, someone who's from in and around Southern California, and find out about how they're living on assignment, how they're impacting and changing the world and doing great things in their community. But tonight, I want to just have a conversation with all of you that are listening live. Hey to all my YouTubers, but all of you that are listening live on Accelerated Radio, iHeartRadio, and iTunes Radio, because I had a phenomenal weekend. And let me say this, in addition to hosting this wonderful show every Sunday night, I'm also the proud pastor of Word of Encouragement Church here in Los Angeles, and I also work at USC doing some civic engagement work at the Center for Religion and Civic Culture. I do public and community engagement. So all that being said, now you know a little bit about me, right? But let me talk about what happened this weekend, or happened today, because it has a lot to do with why we do this, why I do this radio show, and the importance of recognizing full circle moments. So if I had to put a title on today's show, it would be a full circle moment. So today I preached at Second Baptist Church in Los Angeles. Second Baptist Church off of Griffith Avenue is one of the oldest black churches in Los Angeles. It's actually one of a few churches that when he visited Los Angeles, he actually preached at and spoke at, which is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And that was, of course, before my time, but before I was born. However, that is the church that I grew up in as a child. It was a church where I was saved. I received Jesus Christ. I was filled with the Holy Spirit, all those kinds of things. It was the church. It was a place where my spiritual formation took place from a very early age, as far back as I can remember, which is about 7 years old, up until my early teens. And it was during that time that so much spirit formation happened, that it really catapulted me into what I do now. And the blessing of today is that the pastor that was there when I was a child, Pastor Epps, is still the pastor there. And so it was a full circle moment. I have a wonderful picture of he and I. But the last time, not the last time I saw him, because I see him around Los Angeles quite a bit. But the last time I was in that church with him taking a picture was when I was 12 years old and I got baptized. So today was a full circle moment. Of course, I have been back to Second Baptist to visit a few times, but this was my first time being back there as an ordained pastor, ordained elder, minister, preacher, and I was there to preach the gospel. So it was a full circle moment. Like when I left the church as in early teens, I had just been saved. I just got baptized. My mother had a change in her life, which meant I wasn't able to go to Second Baptist any longer. So that happened right shortly after I was actually baptized, and at 12, and then around 13, late 13 going on 14, my mother had a life change, and which meant I had to change my life for several years, mostly throughout high school. But I was able to come back after high school, and I attended for a short time. Then I was led to attend First AME Church, and which is where I accepted my call to ministry, and so on and so forth, and the rest is history. But one of the things that was really a joy for me was that was a church, again, where my spiritual formation took place. It was a church my grandfather and I would go to together, and sometimes other family members, but mainly I would go there with my grandfather. And all the lessons that I learned during that time, from about 6 years old till about 12, late 12, early 13, it was really just a small window. But that small window really catapulted me to being, serving, doing what I do now in the area of ministry. Because after that, even though I wasn't attending church on a regular basis, I was still very committed to what I had experienced, very committed to the word, to my salvation, very committed, and not committed in the sense of I didn't commit any wrong. Of course, I made a lot of mistakes, but committed to the calling on my life, committed to Christianity, committed to, Jesus being my Lord and Savior, right? And what I want to offer to those of you that are listening and those that are watching, because it's not really about a religious show, even though it's a part of my life, so you're going to get that. But the point of tonight's show, the point of tonight's conversation, is I want to encourage you to think about how your early life, or whatever time period of your life, where things formed you. What are the things that formed and shaped your thinking, your ideas, your principles, and maybe even your spiritual journey, your spiritual walk. And again, this is not about everyone being Christian or anything like that. I'm just offering my journey, but I'm offering my journey because as I stood in the pulpit today to present the message today, it was just a wave of emotion and realization of the full circle, right? That long ago, when I was a little kid, this thing that I'm doing now was set in motion. And I want to invite you to think about what were the early parts of life, or not so early parts of life, but what are the parts of life that really set in motion who you are now, who you are becoming, how you are becoming. And not just, we're all a product of our environment, but there are some unique things that we've all experienced, some unique opportunities, or some very powerful moments, powerful seasons. Maybe it was somebody in your life. For me, Pastor Epps was a very strong figure. So maybe it was being around a particular individual or figure that really shaped something about you. And part of what I received today in being there is how important those moments are when it comes to this show and the theme of this show, living on assignment, right? Our assignment, it doesn't really come out of anywhere, but it really, like it's not happenstance, right? It's not serendipitous. Like, there are some things I can actually track back in my childhood and my teenage years that actually lead up to today, that actually lead up to this moment, that there's a dot, there's a connection. And I want to invite you to think about the connections in your life. Like, what are the things you experienced, the people, who were the influences? And when you begin to connect those dots, where you are now, or where you plan on going, or what you're doing now, has so much to do with that. Who I am right now, what I do right now, has so much to do with the dots of my early year. Pastor Epps is a very strong social justice pastor, so it makes absolute sense that a big part of my adulthood has spent fighting for social justice, fighting for justice, fighting for, community, being socially engaged, even, to the point of being part of organizations like Clergy for Black Lives and so on and so forth. And even the work that I do at USC, I'm at the Center for Religion and Civic Culture. I'm the Assistant Director of Public and Community Engagement. Like, civic engagement, community engagement, it's the work that I do. But really, all of that ties back to a child who heard Sunday after Sunday the messages of a pastor who was a social justice pastor. Every message he preaches, there is a social justice component attached to it. So again, I'm not necessarily talking about Christianity. I'm not necessarily talking about Second Baptist Church, that it should be the place for everybody. It is for who it's for, right? I am talking about spiritual formation, life formation. What are the moments? What are the opportunities? What are the seasons? Who are the people? And when you begin to put the dots together, the dots really do lead to where you are now. We do this wonderful exercise at our office called the River of Life. And in that river of life, you draw a river and you examine maybe a season of your life, or you can do your whole life, pretty long river, or you can do a season, you can do a time period, whatever. But on both sides of the river, you acknowledge the good things, you acknowledge the difficulties, but you also acknowledge who were the people that got you through the flow, right? And the whole point of the River of Life is to do what we're talking about tonight, make the connections, and understand that we are not where we are today by happenstance. It's not serendipitous. There really is a link, right? The links are there. And what made today so powerful is like those links becoming very illuminated, right? Like they came alive, kind of like fluorescent lights, popping off in my brain. It was like, oh, that's why this happened, and this and that and da. And now everything connects, and now it makes sense, right? And the beauty of today also, the other part that was so great is people from my church where I pastor now that we started 10 years ago, almost to be 10 years next year, they got a chance to see where I came from as it relates to where my early spiritual formation happened as their pastor. So now that adds another layer of understanding, but also context to who I am and why I am the way I am, and why I preach the way I preach, and why are things important to me the way they are important to me, because now they have another layer of context. And I want to invite you to think about your context, right? What is your context? And again, this is not about Christianity. This is not about Second Baptist Church as a religious space or place, or it's not about you having to be a person of faith. This is for anybody. I just happen to be talking about my journey, but you can apply it to however you wish to apply it. And it's not about necessarily you having to be a person of faith. It's really about thinking through, looking at, examining the connections, looking at, paying attention to, reflecting upon the connections, but also the things that, the context, right? So connections, context, because we all have a context to us. One of the things that, and as a Bible person, one of the things that we're often encouraged to make sure that we unpack when we're preaching or teaching is context. Set the context so that the people understand where this scripture is rooted in. Like, what's the context, right? All scripture is rooted in context. And anybody that preaches or teaches, and I'm only speaking from the Bible because that's what the book that I use, but And anybody that's preaching or teaching out the Bible and doesn't set context is often doing a disservice to those that are listening or possibly watching. And so, because context is important, context also makes the picture bigger, and it gives clarity to how things look the way they look and why things sound the way they sound, and who is this person talking to and why is this happening the way it's happening. Because on the surface, sometimes when people look at my life, it actually doesn't make sense. But when you understand context, it makes absolute sense. When you look at my life or look at your own life within context, everything's begin to make sense or become clearer. They may not make sense, but they certainly can become clearer. So these full circle moments help us to make the connection. How are all the dots connected? But also help give us context from whence we come, right? And the context that has influenced us, the context that has shaped us, informed us, right? And when you were able to make those connections and able to really, have a bigger understanding of context, even our own context, it really does help us communicate. There, see, now the C word, communicate who we are, and communicate, why we do what we do. And sometimes we're not reflecting on the connections and the context. And so it's difficult to communicate who we are, difficult to communicate why we are, difficult to communicate, how we are, how we're showing up, why we're showing up, for what reason, the raison d'être, if you will. But it comes to understanding connection and context. Now, we're really good at doing this with other people, but I'm challenging you tonight, those of you that are listening on iHeart, iTunes Radio, those who listen on Accelerated Radio, and all of my YouTube livers, and those that are watching the replay, of course, take time to reflect upon connection and context, right? And see how those two areas really can help you communicate who you are, communicate how you are, communicate, what you are in this life. And a lot of people don't do that work. Most people don't do that work. Most people, if you ask them who are they, most people actually struggle because they haven't taken time to reflect on the connections as well as the context. Most people just kind of show up every day, wake up and go about a routine, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to help you understand, as we're talking about living on assignment and the full picture, right, is there's a lot of reflection that I did today in this past week in preparing for today, and I want to offer to you to do some of that reflective work and look at the connections. Make those dots. Look at the context. What has been your context as a child, your context as a teenager, your context as a young adult or adult, or whatever age you're in? What's been the context so you can now communicate who you are? And it's not so much about communicating it to an audience as it is about being able to be communicated with to yourself, right? Like, how are you able to communicate who you are when asked the question, who you are when in dialogue with other people, who you are, in this world, right? And how you are. And so I want to invite you to take that journey with yourself and do that. And again, today was just an amazing day, and I really felt compelled to share this with you. I share this with someone that you might do this same kind of work with yourself. And then the last thing I want to share is clarity. Wow, clarity. Today was just a magnificent day of clarity. It was a magnificent day of clarity. And, there's no greater gift that I think we can give ourselves or that life gives us there's no greater gift that life can give us than clarity, right? I mean, probably some greater gifts, but one of the great gifts, I'll say it that way, one of the great gifts that life can give us, that life does give us, is clarity. I don't know about you, but it's nothing like getting a good dose of clarity about life. And again, the show is called Living on Assignment because really it's about people who've gotten clear on their life assignment and how they're living that life assignment, right? And so how I'm even here to have a radio show called Living on Assignment comes out of the connections that were made, comes out of the context from which I come. It comes out of me being able to communicate clearly who I am, right? Communicate that and have a great amount of clarity about my life. And today, that full circle moment, being at Second Baptist, about to preach at the church where I was baptized, having left over, nearly over 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, when I left as a child, even though I've been back to visit, but left as a member, as an early teen, right? And now to be returning there in this way, to be invited to be the guest speaker, the guest preacher, it was just so much clarity. Like today was one of those days where I said, I am right where I need to be. I am where I need to be. And I can share this with you all. Life ain't been easy. It's been a difficult journey, and all of it has been worth it. And all of it has led up to this moment, and life became very clear. This is where you're supposed to be. Not necessarily at Second Baptist Church, not necessarily on Griffith Avenue, but in this place preaching the gospel. And I've known it for a while, so it wasn't like I didn't have clarity about that. I know that, but it was just the level of clarity that came today, that this is where you're supposed to be, that all of everything was about today, was about this full circle moment of coming back to where it all began, right? And seeing God's hand, and that's just for me, that's not necessarily for you, that may not be your journey, but seeing God's hand in all of it and getting me right back to the place where it all began. And the level of clarity that I received today. So here's what I want to invite you to do. Again, can make those connections. Go back to context, pull out your context, understand your context, reflect on your context. Begin to formulate communication about who you are, and watch and look for the clarity in a moment. Get clear on who you are. Get clear. Allow yourself to get clear on why you are. The clarity that came today that said to me, this is really where you're supposed to be. If I ever, and I've questioned a number of times about preaching and pastoring and leading people and community engagement, it would be easier to get a job working for a corporation, making lots of money. But this is where you're supposed to be. That clarity came today. And my hope for all of you as you listen to this, if you're listening on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Accelerated Radio, or on my YouTube livers, and those that watch the replay, is that you get clear. My hope for you is that you get clarity on your assignment, that you get clarity, that you have a moment like this where you absolutely are clear that this is where you're supposed to be. Whatever your this is, that you have that you experience that you are able to move through life saying, I got it. Now, things might change, details might change. I might change churches, I might change cities, but the work that I'm doing was concretized today. Whatever level of questions I had before, whatever level of, uncertainties I dealt with before, all of that got resolved today. And so I want to invite you to consider even clarity. What level of clarity do you have? Do you even need additional clarity? What would it do for you to have clarity? Maybe you're seeking clarity. Maybe you're seeking clarity on your assignment, on your life's work. And I want to invite you to do some reflective work. Go back to the connections. Go back to the context. Go back to communication. How have you been communicating who you are? Do you need to revise that communication? And it's really about communication with self first and then outward to everybody else. And prayerfully, those 3 blocks will lead to the greatest block, which was clarity. Today. And so I just wanted to share that with you all tonight. And hopefully that will help you. Maybe you're trying to put the pieces together. Maybe you're trying to make it all make sense. Maybe you're trying to figure out the next steps. Maybe you're just completely clueless and blindless, and maybe something was said to help you. I don't know. I'm being jokey, but maybe you are just, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. And that may be a real place for somebody, but it doesn't have to be the permanent place. And so thank you for indulging my story tonight and my experience and what happened for me this weekend and what happened for me today. And again, I share that not just so you can hear about me and hear my story, but I share that so that way you can now go and do the work for yourself to look at the connections and how they draw you to where you are today. Look at the context from which you've come. Examine the context. Ask the context some questions. That would then, those 2 pieces coming together, help you to communicate who you are, where you are, why you are, right? Your raison d'etre, if you will. And then with all that coming together, that you really arise to a place of clarity about who you are, where you're going, what you're supposed to be doing, so that you can live the expected full life that we've all been given opportunity to live, right? Expected good life. You should expect a good life. Now, I'm not saying a perfect life. I'm saying a good life. Not saying perfect, not saying without challenges or issues, not even saying without trauma. But there is a good life. Good in the sense of it's well, it's whole, it's meaningful, it's sustainable, it is satisfying. I'm not talking about perfect. I'm not talking about great. I'm not even talking about fair, because fair sometimes could be overrated. And so, so again, I just wanted to share with you. I was so overcome by what God is doing that it was important that I took time tonight to unpack me living on assignment and how all of this comes to be. And so, think it not strange, I host a radio show. It's all about stories about people from community, right? Because I've been hearing these stories, biblical stories, all my life, and they interest me, and I pray that they interest you. So if you've never watched our show before, I want to invite you to, number 1, subscribe. And again, if you're watching on iHeart, iTunes, Accelerator Radio, I want you to subscribe to as well to our YouTube channel, and be a part of our community. But again, if you've never watched any of our shows, go back and watch some of our past shows. But tonight again was really about understanding connection, context, communication, and clarity, and how all that comes together and leads us to this place where we're having, in my case, a really full circle moment that I couldn't have paid for. And see, these kinds of moments, let me just leave you with this. These kinds of moments, you and I can't pay for. We can't pay for these kinds of moments. Y'all listening to me, iHeart, iTunes, Accelerated Radio, YouTube, y'all listening to me. We can't pay for these kinds of moments. We can't secure them with finances. They really just are miraculous, spiritual, human moments. And when we do the work to reflect, do the work to make connections, do the work to understand, context, do the work to communicate, and even, get clarity, right? We do all that. It's super rich. It's uber rich. It's an uber rich life. It's an uber rich life. And I want to invite you to do that. I want to invite you to do those 2 things. So, it was important that I share a little bit of my story, because I'm always interviewing other people to hear about their story. But I wanted you to know me a little better. I wanted you and I to go a little deeper tonight. I wanted you and I to get to know each other just a little bit closer, a little more depth. And so I'm grateful for today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you a little bit more about my journey, my story, and how all of it comes together. And I hope for all of our regular listeners and our regular viewers and those who are on iHeart, iTunes, Accelerated Radio, that this even encourages you to think about your own journey, and that these days are not just a bunch of days lived out and stringed along together. There is something very particular, miraculous, amazing happening in all of our lives. Tap into it. In all of our lives, tap into it. So thank you tonight for being tuned in to Living on Assignment live with your girl, Dr. Najuma. I am my own guest tonight. So I'm asking myself questions in my head and answering them with you. I am my own guest tonight, and I'm so very grateful for this opportunity to share with you all. I'm going to be posting some more content around today's church service, so you will get to see some of that. But until next week, we have a wonderful guest, and we're actually adding on a segment to our show. So we'll let you know when that's coming. But thank you all for being tuned into Living on Assignment Radio with your girl, Dr. Najuma. Go back for all my YouTube livers. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. Make sure you share. And then to everyone that's listening on iHeart, iTunes, and Accelerated Radio, thank you for being tuned in. You too can go to YouTube and look up Living on Assignment and be brought to the page where you can see my lovely face. I can't see anybody's face, but you can see my lovely face. And watch today's show, rewatch it, or watch a past show. But again, share, subscribe. Y'all know the drill, right? So listen, thank you again for being tuned in. We'll be back next week with our regular flow of interviews. I can't wait. And I can't wait to share with you the good news about a new venture we're working out. So y'all be blessed, be wonderful, and we'll see y'all next week. We out. Peace.
1 2 1 2.